Welcome to the Sober Nation FM podcast, where we're putting recovery on the map. I'm your host, Jonathan Sylvester. This show is brought to you by Sobriety Engine. Do you want to take your recovery to the next level? Do you want more support, community, and fellowship? Sobriety Engine is an incredible free online community of men and women supporting each other in their recovery. You can get a ton of great tips, resources, and guidance to help you succeed in recovery and in life. Visit sobrietyengine.com to join today. Sober Nation FM is also brought to you by Recover Health. If you're ready to get fit and start living a healthier lifestyle, all while supporting your sobriety, then you can learn more about having me as your own personal fitness and nutrition coach at rcvrhealth.com. And whether you're listening to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or watching on YouTube, please share this with your friends. Follow, subscribe, and leave a review. Nation, let's hop right into today's episode. Today, I'll be speaking with recovery advocate, public speaker, and former Miss USA, Tara Connor. Thanks for coming on with me, Tara.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, it's funny how things come full circle because 7 years ago, or almost 7 years ago, when I first got sober, I saw you speaking at the Texas Rally for Recovery in Austin. And I remember just thinking, honestly, I don't remember exactly what you were sharing. It was your story to some degree. But yeah. I just remember thinking like how, passionate you were about your recovery. And I was like, man, that's awesome, especially for someone like me that was new to recovery. So I'm really excited to be hearing more about your story today and just more about what you're up to.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm so happy to finally be on. And that's a long time ago, 7 years.
That was a long time.
I mean, I don't remember anything from like my first few years of sobriety. I remember like pictures, but it's like, there it is. Don't remember.
Yeah.
It was also convoluted in there.
Well, so your journey into recovery was very public, to say the least.
Yes.
But for those that don't know your story, what was going on and how did you end up finding sobriety?
So I got sober while I was Miss USA in 2006. And it was a crazy year. The quick short story is from Kentucky, started using at 14, win Miss USA magically. Never in a million years did I think I would win Miss USA, like 2,400 people in my town. I win Miss USA. The next day, I live in New York. My boss is Donald Trump. My roommates are Miss Teen USA and Miss Universe. I didn't know what a cross street was. I'd never had Starbucks or sushi. It was insane. So, I was kind of thrust into this brand new life that I was not familiar with. I was used to a far more slow pace and all of a sudden I have all these responsibilities and I have to look a certain way all the time. And my life was always about looking a certain way. And 9 months into my reign of terror, I tested positive for cocaine because Miss USA threw me under the bus. God gets us how he gets us, you know what I mean? But the next morning I turn on the radio station and it says, Miss USA is failed a drug test for cocaine. And I was like, oh.
Wow.
Okay. And then by the end of the night, I was like top 10 sports centers, top flops. So that's how I got sober. Because 2 weeks into that, Donald Trump was like, what are we supposed to do with this? And I was like, I think that it would say a lot if you sent me to treatment and helped me. It would say more about your character. And he was like, great idea.
Yeah, I mean,
so many things to ask questions about.
Yeah, I did want to ask. I mean, I guess I kind of put myself in that same position. So I do want to ask you about just how all that went down. Like there was the press conference, right? Where like Big Donnie is, saying you're going to go to treatment. And, but
that's not really how it went. So the way that it went, I'll give you the quick one.
Yeah.
So 2 weeks after it hits the news,
right,
I fly back to New York because I had to hide out because there was a sea of paparazzi everywhere.
Sure.
And I was the big word on the street for a very long time because a beauty queen had fallen. And I go into my press conference. They hand me my resignation papers. And he's like, what am I supposed to do with this? You're like running out on the town. You're kissing girls. You're dancing on tables. I was like, I never danced on tables. But he says, what am I supposed to do with this? And I just kind of put the idea in his head. I was like, well, I do think it would say more about the organization and more about your character if you helped me and let me turn this around. And he goes, Trump saves Miss USA. I like it.
That's funny. That's
Yeah.
funny.
So that's kind of how that happened. And I don't really think that his intention was to send me to treatment. Word on the street is he got upset that I was actually in treatment because he wanted me out getting photographed at parties and stuff, because
Okay.
that was the idea of where that would go. But
Right.
but either way, however that puppeteering went, it saved my life.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess what I was thinking about is like being the manipulator that I was. Did you have any, I guess this is just what I was thinking about. Did you have any real intention, like just rewind a little bit, like where were you in your disease, so to speak? Like, had you been starting to try to figure out a way out of all this? Like, was there a part of you that
No,
really wanted treatment?
not at all. And
Okay.
that's what's so crazy about how my recovery has played out, because when I ended up failing a drug test, like, let's be very clear before I go into what my ideas were at that time.
Yeah.
I've been using on a daily basis since I was 14 years old. If
Okay.
I couldn't get a pain pill, I would drink. If I couldn't drink, I would do cocaine. So
Hmm.
basically, whatever was there, I would use it. And if any of that wasn't there, I would find him. You know what I mean? Like, I was always seeking something to make me feel whole in the inside,
Yeah.
because on my own, I was not a whole person. But when I was told that I was going to be going to the Care and Treatment Center and I was going to be there for a month, the only thing, I was scared enough about my image and people thinking that I was like this pile of, can I curse?
Yeah.
Okay, this big pile of shit,
Yeah.
that I was basically just trying to prove to the world that I wasn't the piece of shit they thought I was.
Hmm.
And if that meant that I wasn't going to be able to drink and use for a while, that was fine. So when I went to treatment, it took me a good 2 weeks to even say, like, I'm an alcoholic. And I didn't say it because I knew what that meant. I said it because what I saw was that when people finally identified in treatment, they'd be like,
Right.
like wild applause. And so my whole life, I contributed wild applause to doing something right. So I was basically just walking around for literally a couple of years being like, I'm an alcoholic. This is why. Because in treatment, I did the steps and I was writing down the 10 reasons why I was powerless and 10 reasons why my life was unmanageable. And for me, what that looked like was, I thought that that was like wrapping your car around a pole, or, drunk driving, or going to treatment. Oh, I'm in treatment, so I must be an alcoholic. So when I finally identified, it wasn't because I had conceded to my innermost self that this is a problem. It was because I was like, oh, A plus B equals C. So let me just do what, because I did have an open mind. That was the best thing that I went in with, because I told
Okay.
myself, there's a reason why I'm here.
Yeah.
But later on down the road, I didn't really truly understand my disease until I was about 8 years sober
Wow.
in sobriety.
Yeah.
You know,
Because how old were you at the time when you got
I was
sober?
I got sober a week before I turned 21. So like,
Wow.
I've never had a legal drink. Now, in all fairness, I did a lot of damage in my 6 years of using,
Hmm.
because I put my life on the line for the next one. I know what it's like to show up to a known rapist in the town's, house, just because I might get booze, and I know that I'm going to have to pull tricks. Like, I've sold my body for drugs and alcohol. Like, I've done the things that are deplorable and pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization, but I didn't connect. I didn't connect that it was a mind, body, and spirit, right? So it's like, it's a disease of a threefold nature. I knew that, like, I bought into the idea that, okay, I have this allergy, right?
Right.
Like, not I break out in handcuffs, but
Right. Right.
you know what happens, and I think it happens to a lot of people that get sober, is after the first 6 months to a year, you're on this pink cloud, because you're like, I'm not doing crazy shit. You
Right.
know what I
Yeah.
mean? Things just kind of start to fall into place, but eventually those feelings are still there. Those the unmanageability that lives within your body and the racing thoughts and trying to quiet your mind. And then I found myself doing things sober that I swore I would never do. And it was like the same thing that happens with alcohol. Like, I swear I'll never touch it again.
Yeah. So can you give an example of that? Like, what are you talking about exactly?
Yeah. So I like, get into a relationship. I'm with this dude, and then I've cheated on him 15 times. And I'm like, how did I do that sober? Or here's a great one. And I'm very honest.
Mm-hmm.
So I always try to preface like every conversation that I have that like my honesty makes people uncomfortable, but it is what it is. And we've all gone through it. So if you're uncomfortable, fantastic. I gave you an opportunity to grow. But like, I would put myself in that position where, we've all done the thing where we've had sex without a condom and we're like, and you freak out because you're like, what if I have a disease?
Right.
What if I'm pregnant? I swore I would never do that again. And there go I. Once again, I'm doing something that I swore I would never do again. And I put myself in a position to be harmed, even though I know better, right? So I didn't understand the concept of powerlessness. I thought powerlessness meant like, ooh, once I pick it up, I can't stop it. But true powerlessness, I figured out, is that I can't make myself feel better. I can't wake up 5 minutes early. I can't go on a diet and stick to it for longer than 3 days, right? Like, I have all of these ideas of what I think I should be able to do or what I should be doing or how I should be living, under the delusion that I actually have the power to do that. And then what ends up happening is I end up falling off the diet, having sex without a condom, cheating on yet another boyfriend. And I put myself in these positions and I'm like, how do I keep doing this to me? Right. And I think it takes a long time for people to be able to see like, oh, that's me. I'm doing that. That's not a circumstance. Alcohol's not causing me to do that. Right.
Yeah.
So that's when like the rubber meets the road. Right. I mean, especially in recovery, like because it does say, I'm a big book thumper. It says that we've recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. However, that doesn't mean that there aren't other things I need to recover from. Yeah. And so I do believe, for me, the problem of alcohol and drugs for the most part in my recovery has been removed. That problem's gone. So now it's like the real shit. Like my now I've figuring out that I have mental illness, figuring out that I had a love addiction of sorts, figuring out that I'm continuing to put myself in these positions, and I'm putting myself in a position to be hurt, living in the delusion that I'm spiritually fit.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's a scary day when you wake up and you're like, oh, I can't make myself feel better.
Yeah.
What do I do?
Right. Exactly. Well, and I think really you're kind of touching on the difference between just sobriety and recovery to a large degree. Right. So, I'm thinking about this, like, I'm really loving hearing your story. And as I was, because I knew a little bit about it, but as I was doing a little bit more research before this interview, I just kind of kept putting myself in your position and just thinking about all this. One of the things I definitely kept thinking about is like, you're going through this process that we've all gone through. It may look a little different, but it's the same to some degree. Yeah. And this transformation, so to speak. The thing that I can't really wrap my head around, or I'm curious about, is like, what was it like going through this in public? Because I mean, was there more, what do you feel like? I feel like part of you is saying there was some accountability there because you kind of had to do, so many people were watching, but I also hear you saying there was obviously a lot of pressure too.
Right. Yeah. It was, it's crazy when you get sober. I'm sorry, my back is like messed up. I've been making masks like a sweatshop worker because that's what my garage is right now. So what's up? It was hard. I think that when you get sober in front of the public, especially around the time that I did, because the stigma was very alive when I got sober. That was 13 years ago.
Yeah. Very different.
It's different now. Like if a celebrity comes out now and they're like, nah, I drink too much. They're like, good for you.
Yeah, exactly. Let's put him on a magazine.
Right. And but the magazine caption is far different than what my magazine caption was. Like,
Yeah.
I was called like Mess USA and
Mm.
disgraced Miss USA, whereas and I don't mean this in any other way, but nothing but love. It's just a real example. If Demi Lovato overdoses, people are like, God bless her, we're praying for her.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So the stigma at that time was far different because it was almost like being a witch at the Salem witch trials,
Hmm.
just trying to prove you're not a witch so that you don't get stoned to death.
Right.
And so what it did was it beat me into a state of reasonableness in a different kind of way. I think when we're going through life, if we're successful and if we're doing well and while we're using, it's very hard to see like me. This could be an issue,
Yeah.
right? Because I still made it look really cute, even towards the end. Like I was functioning, whatever that is. But when I went to treatment and I heard about the solution, I knew that it was solving a lot of my inner turmoil. And so I knew that there was a solution because along with, everyone else in treatment, I had learned like, oh, this is an illness. Wow, that makes so much sense. Holy crap. People need to know about this, right?
Mm.
Like I went in like just a warrior on the front lines, like, no, you need to, people are listening to you shame me. Like there's a solution, right? And so at first it was hard, but I also had this new lease on life and I was optimistic and I knew that it was for a greater purpose. I could see very, very easily how like, all right, like I grew up, my mom was religious, my dad had been in church and all of that. So you hear that a lot, like everything happens for a reason and God has his hand all over it. So these were like ingrained in my DNA and molecules because they're my ideas. That's what I was impressed upon me. So when I was in treatment, I was like, all right, there's a reason for all of this. So
Yeah.
even though I want to die, I must need to stick around for something
Mm.
because I think my story might help people. And so the first few years of me, I was an advocate at 30 days. They were having me speak at fundraisers. And all
Wow.
I knew was my story. Like I didn't know solution. I didn't
Yeah.
know the ins and outs. I didn't know that people were having a hard time paying for treatment. Like I didn't know all of that. So over the years, I saw a lot. I saw the criminalization of addicts. I'm speaking in prisons. I'm speaking at drug courts. I'm speaking to prosecutors who are thinking that people having 10 and 11 DUIs is a choice. And I'm literally, I just had this new fire that started to burn. So, there's a part of me that for the first few years being publicly sober and that all of a sudden becoming my life, it became my career. It became everything. So for a good up to 8 years, I was just, again, trying to put on this brave face and show people that recovery works and that
Mm.
you can do it too and that there's a solution. But I wasn't living in the solution. So I'm sober, but I'm dying because I'm trying to look good for people.
Okay. Yeah.
And so it wasn't
Man.
until, recently that, well, the past however many years that's been, I've been like, no, 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 this is life or death.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I just can't even imagine. Well, and I think you said it really well. Like, there is, and it talks about this like in the promises, right?
Hmm.
A little bit. It's, this did happen for a reason. And whether you're someone like you that's in the public eye or someone like
Hmm.
me that is not, it happened. The reason that it happened in my mind is because I can help the next person.
Right.
Like if I'm able to show one person like, hey, there is a solution to this
Yeah.
deal. You don't have to keep living that life.
Right.
Then that's the reason. And I think it's really cool that I think it's just awesome when that starts to click. Like you said, at
Mhm.
some point it did for me too. It was like, man, I feel like crap.
Right.
My life is totally screwed up.
Hmm.
Uh, Thankfully, I had people around me kind of telling me that this is going to work out because otherwise I just wouldn't believe it.
Right.
But I feel like there's a reason that I'm here.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, for every alcoholic, you get a bottom, you're given a purpose. You know what I mean? You hit a
Yeah.
bottom, you're given a purpose. And there's something really beautiful about having that being like today, my main purpose is to stay sober and help another alcoholic. I mean, it's the most beautiful thing. And it doesn't matter what scale it's on. It doesn't matter if it's on a podcast, or for me, the real work is sitting in front of somebody taking them through the work.
Yeah.
That's the real work. And you know, I think for like the first 8 years of my recovery, I thought, well, I'm being of service. I'm speaking all the time. I'm speaking at meetings, but I wasn't doing the work. And so,
Okay.
you know, I mean, I was going to meetings because I have like this whole new passion when it comes to long-term recovery, because I don't think people quite understand how hard that is. Because what happens is that at a certain point, when you do go to the meetings, you do go through the steps, you do start to get your life together, we always hit a lull. There always is this new spiritual bottom that we go through. And I think that even the stigma, like even like the anonymous people talks about how people in 12 step rooms are afraid to say that they're sober, because what if they relapse? It like looks bad. And I think that a lot of people with time either have too much of an ego or too afraid to say, hey, I'm really struggling, like
Hmm.
suicidal, you know, and they're just killing themselves. Like it's a long-term sentence, if you will, but it's a long-term sentence of service work and being a useful human being.
Yeah.
You have to take care of yourself. And it wasn't until, you know, I hit that bottom in recovery, because to me, like, I don't feel like I got into recovery until I was 8 years sober. And I think that, you know, we hear a lot, especially in the room, just hold on to your seat, meeting makers make it. And it's like, kind of, but there's so much more to that. There's so
Sure.
much work that we actually have to like boss up and do. And it's when you get on the other side of that, that's when, even in the public, like my stories started not changing, but going deeper. Like I started sharing more honestly about things that people would never share about, you know, like having sex without a condom,
Hmm.
or, you know, going through experiences where, you know, it's heroic or courageous to say I was molested, but it's even deeper when you go deeper than that, because a lot of us have been molested, but a lot of us don't want to say that. A, at the time I liked it, and B, when I found out that that was my abuser, I was really sad that I couldn't love them anymore. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
those were the things that were eating me alive on the inside that I needed to get freedom from. And so, you know, I think my advocacy work has changed so much into just encouraging people that it's okay if you've done dumb shit. Like we've all done it.
Hmm.
But there's a freedom that comes on the other side of that when you can work through it and also be able to share about it, because I share things that make people cringe that they swear that they would take to their grave.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
once I was able to be like, oh, a lot of people have done that shit,
Hmm.
I got to take the shame out of it. So not only do we have to take the shame away from just the disease in itself, we have to take the shame away from being a human being.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and so I just want to ask, I mean, why in your mind is it because I think like, okay, the conversation you and I are having right now, like I'm not shocked at all or anything,
Sure.
because I think like just being in like once you've been in recovery for a little while,
Hmm.
like that's just kind of how, I mean, I almost have to like, not like I'm not really open,
Hmm.
but I almost have to like in a conversation with someone that's not in recovery. I don't want
Hmm.
to say like censor myself, but just
Right.
depending on how the conversation, like I don't want to like take them hostage with what
Sure, sure, sure.
with what I'm sharing. You know what I'm saying?
Do you
But
ever like share with people that aren't in recovery and they're like, mm,
yeah, yeah, this guy
mhm,
is crazy.
okay. Yeah.
So I mean, why is it in your mind like? Why is it important to be sharing just that you're in recovery and this is what recovery is all about? Like why do you continue to do that? Why do you think that's important to be doing?
I think it's important, because it's more than just like we hear it a lot all over the place these days. Like there's treatment and there's access and like, meh, 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 like which is great. We need to get that out there. That used to be wordy nerds. It's not like that anymore. But there's a lot of people that haven't taken that leap of faith into recovery, whether it's going to rehab or a 12-step program or even an Al-Anon or, you know, any type of recovery,
Mhm.
because they're afraid of how it's going to make them look. And I found that that's like one of our biggest fears as human beings is looking bad.
Mm.
And that fear of looking bad prevents us from saving our lives every single day. Even in recovery, my fear of looking bad will kill me if I don't, you know, swallow my pride or bury it so that my pride doesn't bury me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to not only share, like, yeah, I've celebrated this many years of recovery, times whatever. I mean, time's great, but at the same time, like, I just have today, and I was far crazier 8 years sober than I ever was using or drinking. So I think it's important to show people that, yeah, recovery is great and it looks good and it's fun and life gets beautiful, it's magical, and the dream, the promises do come true because they do. But there's also new things that happen in life that we struggle with. Like, this has been one of the hardest years of my life. Like,
Mm.
everything's fine, nothing's wrong. But my husband and I have been trying to have a baby for almost a year and a half now, and it's just not happening. How do you
Oh,
deal with that?
yeah.
So I mean, that's, not that that's a recovery related issue, but it's related to me, which is related to my recovery. And that's something that I've really had to work on,
Yeah.
as far as, how do I not let this eat up my self-esteem? How do I not let this be like the sole focus of my life? Because what if it's not meant for me to have a child?
Mm.
So there's layers to it, because life happens every day. So I think the more that we share openly, not only about the good, but also about the bad, like, let people know that, hey, you're going to eat a shit sandwich every now and then, but how do you get through that digestion?
Right. Yeah.
Because it's not all rainbows and butterflies. Like, life is going to happen. Like, that's the guarantee. So my hope is that it's like, okay, if I share this with you, even if it doesn't touch you for recovery, maybe if it's just going to help you with life,
Hmm.
because I need that. I need to hear other women talk about, like, it's taken me 5 years to get pregnant, but it
Yeah.
finally happened, or we had to do this. Like, this were my solutions. So it's all about creating that safe space for people. If I can give them my shame, then maybe it'll help unveil theirs, so that they can be like, it's okay. That's
Yeah.
what's important. We need to show people that being an alcoholic or an addict, it's like being a diabetic. It's just like, we deal with life the way that we did, but there's a way to get up and out of the hopeless state of being, so that we can have some hope when life does happen.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. I mean, and it's such an interesting deal because I know that, like, on the flip side of what you're talking about, like sharing that, like, shit is going to get real, like life is
Mhm.
still going to happen. I know that for me personally, like, life got really good really fast,
Yeah.
and I think, look, like, you put the alcohol and the dope down, like, your bank account grows a little bit, like
Right.
things start
Yeah.
to get better.
You're gonna start saving money until you start gambling.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Exactly, yeah, until the next vice comes along. but
Right.
but I mean, life, like, on all level, like, like, everything started to get better. And part of me was almost, I didn't want to share that.
Hmm.
I didn't want to share that. And thankfully, some people pointed out to me, like, no, you need to be sharing this good stuff, because sometimes, like, in 12-step meetings, like, someone shares something kind of bad that's going on, and man, it just spirals and it gets dark, and it's
And
like
yeah, and the doctor.
everyone's sharing all the bad stuff,
Yeah, yeah.
and but I appreciate what you're saying on the other side too. It's like, when things aren't going great, like, I need to be honest and share
Mhm.
that too, because that's just being real. That's what life is.
Yeah. And it's also offering, even that in itself, like, there's been posts that I've done on Instagram where I'm like, I haven't brushed my teeth in 3 days, guys. I haven't showered. I haven't been able to get off my couch,
Yeah,
because, like, mental illness is very real. And a lot of addicts and alcoholics deal with it. And,
sure.
I've had my experiences with depression,
Mm,
and man, like, I just felt like, well, this is what's going on with my life. So I'm not going to give you the highlight reel. I'm going to give you my life. So it's weird when you become like a true recovery advocate that's been doing it for a long time, and kind of like going on this journey, and allowing people to see it, and But I think that that's what people need to hear. They need to hear like, oh, she didn't brush her teeth either.
Right.
Cool. I feel so much better. Cause those are the things that a lot of us get tripped up on. Like, like I haven't showered,
Mhm.
It's like I can't pull myself out of this bed. I'm a piece of shit. That's what we tell ourselves. But it's like,
Yeah.
no, you have depression right now. So maybe go get an assessment
Mhm.
because there's a solution to that as well. And there's ways to do it. But sometimes as humans, the best we can do is survive.
Yeah.
And if you can survive through the day, I don't even care if you've like motherfucked everyone you've come into contact with. If that's the
Mhm.
best you can do that day, you survived it.
Yeah.
There's better days coming. So when you do get that willingness to brush your teeth, there's solutions to pull out of it. But when you're dealing with mental illness, that's the scary thing. When we get sober, it's like, all right, we put it down, we're doing the 12 steps, the alcohol problem, cool. But I fell under the idea that like, oh well, the 12 steps will change my medical or my chemistry in my
Mhm.
body, and that's just not true. Like if I came in with diabetes and I came into the 12 steps, I can't pray away diabetes.
Yeah. Well, especially
Can't
with
pray
all
away
the cakes and stuff around, that's probably
for
not going
sure.
to
But but it's like, with mental illness, like I felt like, oh my God, like I was so ashamed that I went on medication for that. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, this is a shame.
Yeah.
Just because someone put that in my head, they're like, that's a crutch. And it's like, no,
Right.
I
Yeah.
want to die and I can't be useful to you or anybody else if I don't do something to fix my brain.
Mhm.
I got to treat my brain.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I'm glad that conversation is, I think for the most part, starting to change. Every now and then I'll hear about, even at some of the meetings I go to, like I couldn't believe, I didn't personally hear this, but I had, other people telling me that people had told them in meetings, like they're not sober because they're
Sober.
taking certain
Zoloft.
medication. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like not like
I'm like,
Xanax and
excuse
stuff
me,
like,
I don't feel anything from that Zoloft. It doesn't even make me sleepy. And to
yeah,
me, anything that makes me sleepy is a relapse. And I'm like, if
right.
that's not a relapse. You don't need, there's no effect. It's just like one day your windshield isn't as dirty.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Some of that is just kind of ridiculous. So I'm glad the conversation about mental illness and other issues is kind of changed. It used to be, I mean, it's still sometimes like this taboo thing, and it's like,
Right.
why? So many of us are dealing with it. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So
Yeah. And then I look at some old timers and I'm like, maybe you should get an assessment.
yeah, yeah,
Because I just couldn't imagine
yeah,
like 30 years sober and just being bah humbug every single day of my life. And I've also seen way too many, like even in the past year,
hmm,
people with decades of sobriety. One threw himself in front of a train, one put a gun to his head.
yeah,
Like, listen, yeah, you're sober, you're being of service, you're doing all of that. But my sponsor was incredible. Like I was going through the work, and the
okay,
last time I went through the work, I was going to a meeting every single day. I didn't
hmm,
miss one, no matter what. Every day I went to a meeting. I read out of the big book for at least an hour a day. And when I was in my writing portion with the fourth step, any of that stuff, I would at least write for an hour a day. My fourth step had over 500 names on it. I
wow,
My
that
binder
is
was
thorough.
it was thorough. Yeah, like because I didn't want to miss anything because I finally understood like, oh, there's freedom on the other side of this. I made 400 amends, all of them.
Wow,
I made all of the
wow.
amends. And so when I did get to because the promises are the ninth step promises, it's
Mm.
like once you are in that ninth step and you do that handshake with God where you're like, all right, homie, let's go out there and fix this shit so we can get to use. You know what I mean?
Mhm, mhm.
Like they do come true. And I started to realize that. But when I was in the middle of my fourth step, I'm going to meetings, praying and reviewing, meeting with my sponsor, doing more work for my own recovery than I'm doing for anything else in my life, even work. Like recovery came first for like 3 years because I almost died, So I'm in it. And my sponsor looked at me and I was like, is it normal that I can't stop crying? Like, and that I'm tired and that, I mean, just unmanageable, just living in unmanageability while seeking God. It was crazy. And he was like, I think you need to get an assessment. And he gave me that freedom. It could like make me cry because it changed my life. I suffered my whole life because no one gave me that freedom to not suffer.
Mm.
So I think that's why I do what I do, like I want to give somebody that freedom so that they can like stop beating themselves up and like live, because even during a pandemic, there are things to live for. There are
Yeah,
things that we can do. We don't have to suffer.
Yeah.
No
I'm
one deserves to suffer.
No, not at all. I'm glad you just said that. I think there's been a lot of conversation lately about what recovery looks like right now. Like,
Mhm.
and recovery looks like what you and I are doing for the most part. I
Yeah.
mean, a lot of it, the meetings, they're
This
all like,
literally feels like I'm in a meeting right
yeah,
now.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And so the Zoom meetings are popping, and
Mhm.
I was actually really impressed. I know you're out in LA, and a buddy of mine sent me a list. Like, this was weeks ago of all the meetings in LA, and I was
Mhm.
like, man, that's awesome. And I'm
Yeah.
here in Houston, and we were kind of, a little behind you guys with the quarantine and all that. But I was like, yeah, that needs to happen here too. So I thought that was really cool. But a lot of the conversation has been, you know, how do I stay on top of my recovery, and a lot of getting back to the basics. And I think it's, hey, you know what? Even though I can't go to a meeting in person right now necessarily,
Right.
um, all the stuff you just mentioned, getting back into step work,
Yeah.
journaling, and
Oh my God.
because it's like my background is in fitness and nutrition, so I always relate things to like working out, and it's
Yeah.
like you're in the gym for an hour, maybe an hour and a half a day.
We can't
What
do that here.
Yeah, we can't do it here. Well, I have a pretty legit home gym, so I'm
Mm.
I'm all I'm all set. I feel like one of the privileged few right now,
Yeah.
but no, but it's like, you're in the gym an hour a day. What's going on the other 23 hours a day? And that's kind of the way I'm thinking about this. It's like, man, there's so much other stuff that we
Right.
can be doing
Yeah.
for our recovery. Now, you were talking about old timers, and I just want to rewind here for a second. You and I both got sober at a pretty young age. You
Mhm.
definitely like a few years ahead of me. What were some of the biggest challenges you think you ran into just in terms of getting sober younger, and just what
Mm.
was your experience around all that?
I think that there was a part of it where when you do get sober before you can even legally drink, it's kind of like you do go through that experience of, well, maybe I was just young.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
maybe I just needed therapy. Well,
Hmm.
maybe I just, I'm so grateful that I'm grateful for my experience because me having so many eyeballs on me for so many years, just like people waiting for me to fuck up. You know what I mean? Like that kept me sober for a long time. Even when I was miserable, that saved my life, like, and it's amazing how, like, it's funny how God works. People are like, well, where's God in that? And I'm like, well, God was in my ego on that one because that kept me sober. I mean, there's so many positives to every single negative. And I don't know, like, it was tough. Here's the thing, the meetings and stuff that I was going to, and I'm not knocking meetings, I'm not knocking any program, I'm not knocking any of that. I didn't really have the ears maybe to hear it, but when I finally went to a meeting where I heard the real, like, the solution, whether it was step based and book based, I was like, it pissed me off because here I am at like 8.5 years sober, listening to someone who has less time than me tell me that maybe I should do the steps. And I'm like,
Mm,
don't you know who I think I am? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Hmm.
and, like my sponsor, I have a male sponsor. He scares the shit out of me. I got him out of South Central. His name is Eric, that he has saved my life. Like, I go to him and trust. He married my husband and I, like he's
Oh,
family
wow.
at this
That's
point. But
awesome.
he has less time than me, but he knew that book like the back of his hand. And I trust him with my life. And I just knew, like, the truth, anytime you get mad, anytime someone says something to you and your knee jerk reaction is to either like have your inner alter ego that wants to like be petty, just
Yeah.
when that happens, it's time to do some work,
Hmm.
right? Even if it's like coming from a good place, when someone's like, maybe you should do this, and you're like, "Mm." Like,
Yeah.
who do you think you are? It's like, maybe you should do that. And I think that that's what I struggled with. I didn't hear the truth in a lot of meetings because I think there's a lot of recovery around. There's a lot of good stuff, but I really do think that, like, I'm that hopeless type, man. Like, I'm the real one. I'm not that moderate drinker. I'm not that hard drinker. Like, I'm very clear because I had a very thorough first step experience at 8 years sober. I'm very clear that my life is on the line.
Mm,
And when you go to a lot of those frothy, you know how it says in the big book, like frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. Like those were the type of meetings that I was going to. In Hollywood, a lot of people want to show up because so and so's there.
Okay.
Or, you know, like that's the cool place to be because it can
Right.
get creepy, you know. I needed to go like I heard the solution on Skid Row. I went to a meeting because I followed a girl. This guy had broken up with me, and I was like, "Don't you know?" Anyway, I'm like, "You're a bartender," and I'm like, "He can break up with you. Like, you're kind of crazy, right?" So I'm going downtown. My life's falling apart in my head, and that's where I met my sponsor because he's like, "How you doing?" And I was like, "Well, I just moved into a place that I don't know if I can afford. My dude's a piece of like he won't go to therapy. I don't know when my next check's coming in. I don't know. How the fuck are you?" And he was just like, "If you need someone to take you through the steps, I'd be honored." And
Wow.
it pissed me off. And he said to me, "Oh, is your boyfriend not acting the way that you need him to for you to be comfortable?" And that phrase changed my life
Hmm.
because I was like, what? Oh yeah, he has free will. You know, so it just, I finally heard what I needed to hear, and I finally, you know, had the experiences because we have to go through those experiences. I had to be
Yeah.
dry for 8 years to take my recovery seriously. I don't wish that on anybody. I wish I would have drank, honestly, because I either would have died sooner and not suffered as long, or I would have gotten into the work sooner.
Hmm.
You know, so time means shit. It's like what you do with it.
Yeah.
But I did. I struggled. I struggled like listening to people talk, and I struggled in the beginning because so many people were nice to me just because I was that new girl that was in the news, you know.
Hmm.
And now I look so different from back then. Like when I hit my bottom, like I don't have bangs, I don't have the long no, I have tattoos now, and so like I'm just a person amongst persons, and I love it. Love it. I mean, sometimes people will be like, meet me, and I'm like, but when I finally heard the solution and it hit my spirit, I was like, ooh, that's the stuff that I need to start talking about because it's not just like, oh, it'll get better. No, it won't. There's some work to do.
You know what I think is cool is, and you know, it's just an interesting deal. I don't know if it's just like, I personally do think that recovery is going through an evolution of sorts,
Yeah.
and you know, 12 step or not, like
Mhm.
things are changing, the conversation's changing. One thing that I think is really cool, and I'm just really loving hearing your story, because your story, like, everyone's story is different, right? Like,
Mhm.
and there are these suggestions, and I think, like, for the most part, like, a lot of them are coming from a pretty, like, common sense place, and like make a lot of sense. But then there are things that I think that, like, people have kind of like set down as rules that don't necessarily fit everybody. I mean, what you're telling me right now is that, you know, at 8 years sober, like, you were not happy, you were not where you wanted to be,
Right.
and it took you, you know, and you hadn't gone through the steps yet, and it took
No,
you,
I
you had
had
gone
gone
through the
through the
steps.
steps.
Okay. Well,
However,
yeah.
it was just a frothy way of going through the steps.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You hadn't gone through the steps thoroughly.
Thoroughly. Yeah.
Okay. And it took you getting a male sponsor,
Hmm.
you know, to start getting on the right track. I mean, and I hear
Hmm.
that type of stuff a lot these days. You know, it's
Hmm.
just like, you're things are going to fit people differently. And
Right.
I think it's, you know, to thine own self be true, right? Like,
Yeah.
what do I really need, to be able to do what I need to do and move forward
Mhm.
and help, you know, the next
Right.
person in line, you know?
Yeah. And it
So
is
yeah.
really weird right now. I mean, because even some of my beliefs are being challenged right now. Like I
Mm,
used to feel like you must take your body to a meeting. Well, does that still count though? Now that like even like I wouldn't even FaceTime with a sponsee to do or my sponsor to do step work like
yeah.
face to face. That's the rules.
Right.
That's our rules. It's not like
Hmm.
written in stone, but that's what has worked. And now it's like, oh, we have to switch it up. Like that's what's so crazy about this whole pandemic and how
It
it's
is.
affecting everyone. We're all the same. And the rules have changed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything's changed.
Yeah.
And so I think it's like, how do we get through this together? I can tell you that like I like being on meetings while I'm cooking dinner. It's great.
Man, I was just gonna say, like, I've hit more been in more
Mhm.
meetings recently than I have in a long time. I've connected
Yeah.
with more people. Like, I think it's pretty cool.
It is, but it's because we aren't too busy for our recovery right now,
That's true.
right? And it's like, I mean, life has like completely changed for most of us that aren't working right now or whatever. I mean,
Mhm.
I've been very busy sewing, but it's amazing how when we spend so much time, like this is the first time I've put on makeup and that was for you. Like I don't like I was dreading it just because I'm
Hey,
like, wait,
my wife's about to cut my hair here in a minute, so
my
I get
husband
it.
cuts my hair and he's a seamstress. It's totally straight. But we're all the same right now. We're
Yeah,
all on the same playing field. Like we're all in this together and we're all equal. And I think that's the first time that that's happened because in life, when we have time to hustle and prove ourselves and become something and prove these people wrong or prove ourselves right, like none of that can happen right now.
hmm,
So we're being forced to sit down and deal with ourselves, our real selves, and meeting people in that state of mind because no one's hustling right now. We're all
yeah,
just trying to get by. When's the
that's true.
last time that's happened?
Yeah, very, very true. Yeah, well, and I think, it's like been an interesting thing because I've seen people and, from some of the groups that I attend and like my club and stuff like that, that they're, when everything was uncertain as to whether like we'd really be on lockdown or whatever, like there were people that like vowed, like, I will not be in an online meeting. Like
Right,
that is not for me. And
right,
guess who I'm seeing almost every day?
right.
And
Yeah,
so, and it's actually pretty cool. I mean, there are some old timers that I'm like, man, I'm kind of like seeing these, actually seeing
yeah.
these people here.
And I've been in meetings with people all over the country, all over the country. Like usually when you go to meetings, you see the same faces,
But
you see
yeah,
everything. But like I was in this meeting 2 days ago, and I was hearing someone that like lived in Canada share, and it just like ripped my heart open. And then I heard from his mother, who was in Al-Anon, who was in the same meeting, like talking about
wow,
her own experiences. And I mean, you hear so many different things because we all are in our relative bubbles when we're at home, but
that's
like
true.
just to hear different recovery and being like, oh, like no matter what path that you take to recovery, we're all doing it together. We're all in it together, whether it's steps, whether it's therapy, whether it's psychotic stuff like, shooting laser beams in your head, magnetics, like whatever, like as long as you're willing to do something and take direction, that's the main thing. No matter what step that you take in recovery or in your life, you have to be willing to not do it your way.
Hmm.
And as long as you're willing to do that, you'll be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. One thing I definitely wanted to ask you about is your show, Real Talk 100,
Yeah.
which I've watched a couple episodes of. So tell us about it.
So, Real Talk 100 is basically it's like a talk show slash podcast that's completely on hold right now. Have you ever had contact with Jessica Landon?
No, but I'm planning on getting a hold
Yeah,
of her.
she's
Yeah.
great. So she and I connected just through being recovery advocates. I read about her story, fell in love with her, and now she's one of my best friends. Like I call her new child, my baby. um, she and I decided when we were just listening to some of the conversations that we have on the couch, we were like, oh my God, you can't write this stuff. Like it's crazy. So we started a little show called Real Talk 100, and it's all about real talk. Like we don't want to hear fluff. We don't want to hear like, how great your life is and like what you're working on right now. Like we really want to hear like, okay, tell me about the worst time in your life and how you
Yeah.
got
Well,
like
one of the episodes I was watching was, what is the guy's name that was on the hills?
Jason
Uh,
Waller.
yeah, Jason. Yeah. And like, that was some real talk. Like
Oh yeah.
he was breaking down like
It was
the
one of the
stuff.
best interviews I've ever seen him
Yeah.
do. He's
That
like
was
my
really
brother.
good.
But I even told him, I was like, something's shifting in you right now. But I think that's important because, a lot of times when we do, whether it's a podcast or talk show or whatever, even if it's like an article, like a lot of times it's like, what are those set questions? I mean, it's the questionnaire that you sent me, like, what do you want to talk about? And it's like, I think that it's so important. Like, let's talk about the real stuff, you know?
Exactly.
And that's what I love to hear. So it's actually shifting up. Like Jessica and I literally shot our own episode where we're doing it like a fly on a wall in our living room, and got it all set up, had a great episode, hour long, and her mic wasn't on. So, you know, that takes work figuring it out. But when the pandemic's over, obviously we will check it out. But you can go to evertalktv.com. It's on EverTalk. It's probably on YouTube. We haven't even promoted it yet. Like we haven't even we didn't even know the episodes were up. That's how she's a new mom. I work a lot. Like it's fun. So it'll pick up, it won't. But if you guys want to watch some new content, check out Real Talk 100. You can go to EverTalk TV. It's probably on YouTube. I'll promote it on my Instagram. It's fine. You'll see it. Tara Connor, Tara E. Connor. Some bitch stole my name.
I did notice that actually. I was like, how did this other person get it? Maybe we need to do something about it.
Yeah. Give me my name back.
I know. All right. Well, so before we wrap up here, and I think you've already shared a lot of great advice, but what is one piece of advice that you'd like to share with the Sober Nation?
Oh, man. I think right now, just try to be honest with yourself. And if you're going through a hard time, you got to open up to somebody. Like, don't live with that. I always find that the things that I need to talk about are the ones where I'm like, I don't want to tell my sponsor this, or this is trivial. But if it's something that's on your mind and you're kind of embarrassed to talk about it, because you're going to get so much freedom at the end of the day. Like, how free do you want to be? Like, that's my question I have for them. How free do you want to be?
That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome advice. And man, you're so right. Like the stuff I don't want to talk about, like that's where the resentment's building up, or that's where like the anger or whatever is really getting worked up underneath.
Especially when you're married, like when you're just like, this is fine. It's not like I don't need to talk about this, but like you're just like noticing like you didn't pick up the potty pad, put the laundry away, like that kind of stuff. Like those are little hangnails, but those are the things that gets us. Like it's like 1,000 little tricks like that can take us out. We just forget about them, but they're in there.
Yeah.
So how free do you want to be?
That's awesome advice and great question to ask ourselves. So you can connect with Tara by following her on Instagram at Tara E. Connor. Thanks for coming on today with me, Tara.
Thank you.
Be sure to check out the show notes for all the info from today's episode. Sober Nation FM is brought to you by Sobriety Engine. Sobriety Engine is a free online community of men and women supporting each other in their recovery. Visit sobrietyengine.com to join today. This show is also brought to you by Recover Health. If you're ready to get fit and start living a healthier lifestyle while supporting your sobriety, you can learn more about having me as your own personal fitness and nutrition coach at rcvrhealth.com. And again, whether you're listening to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or watching on YouTube, please share this with your friends, follow, subscribe, and leave us a review. Nation, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.